We just finished talking about layers and layer masks and groups and how to make them work together. Now let's talk about keyboard shortcuts. Because let's face it, Photoshop has a lot of tools. You know, we have brushes, we have selection tools, we have move tools, we have rotate. We have so many that we already covered. So let's make that into something that's easier for you to get to without having to go to your toolbar all the time. Now it's fairly simple. Go back into our lovely Photoshop and we'll go into Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts. Now, under Shortcuts, there is something you need to change first, being that by default, it's set to Shortcuts for application menus. For instance, instead of application menus, go to Shortcuts for tools. The reason why you want to go to Shortcuts for tools is because this entire set of tools is located on the left-hand side. It's all consolidated, so every single time you see this little drop-down icon, there is a tool assigned to each of them. That is why we don't go over every single tool, because they're not all useful to us, especially at this level and stage. Granted, there are some that we eventually do need in small amounts, but it's the main ones we want to worry about, the ones that we're using 95% of the time. Here's the cool thing about Photoshop is the fact that you can make it completely customizable to yourself, to your workflow, and anything you want to use. For me personally, as a retoucher, I like to use the healing brush, the clone brush that we're going to talk about so much, the regular brush, and things like the move tool, the eraser, and changing brush sizes as well. I'll show you first and foremost how to edit a shortcut, and then I'll show you what my shortcuts are as well. The first place we want to go to is any tool that you think you want to use more often. For example, let's say that you decide you want to use the regular brush tool quite a bit. I've put that to C just because it's closer to the left side of the canvas. Now I'm right-handed, so the left hand stays on the keyboard itself primarily, and I can hit C because it's close to every other major key on the keyboard that I'm going to be using with the rest of my shortcuts. So it just was practical for me to put it as close as possible to the left side before any of the other keys were used. What I'm trying to get at here is, if you want to put it to any key, you can. If you're right-handed, you can change it to any key that you want on your keyboard. Granted, it's a letter, and it's not a command like Shift. So if you are left-handed and you use the Wacom tablet or the mouse on the other side, and you decide that the right hand is something you want to use for your keys, you can change it to something like P or L or M. But for me, since I'm right-handed, my left hand uses most of the keys I'm going to be changing. So I'll change that to C. By default, it's B. However, when I do change it, so let's say since it's already C, I'll change it to something like K. You have to hit Accept, and if a warning pops up that says this key is also being used by other letters, like for instance, if I go B, it might or might not say that, you might have to go to the other keys that are also using that same letter and either remove it or change the key. For me, I just remove everything that has the same letter assigned to it. So anytime I push that key, it goes to that particular tool. Now, if you do have any tool that has the same letter assigned to it, you have to hold Shift and the button itself. So let's say we put all of these to B. For demonstration's sake, I'll hit OK. If I just click on B once, it stays on the brush tool. But if I want to go to the other keys that have B assigned to it, I can hit Shift and B, and it cycles through all the tools that have B assigned to it. So I'll go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, Shortcuts for Tools, and I'll scroll down. And about a quarter of the way down, you'll see it right there. So I'll change it back to C. Now, some of the other ones that I change, are my healing brush, which I'm going to get into. It's something we use for retouching quite a bit to remove blemishes and things like that and distractions. Where is it located? Ah, here it is, the healing brush. I have that set to A because it's the furthest letter to the left of my keyboard. The one next to that is my clone brush. Clone stamp tool, which copies information of an image and pastes it somewhere else. And again, we're going to do that later. But for now, I keep that to S because A and S are next to each other. Since I want that to be the only key that S is assigned to, I'll take out another key that has S as well. So I click on it, delete it, and move on. The last thing that I really like in terms of actually changing brush sizes is the decrease and increase brush size key. By default, it's the open and close bracket on the right side of the keyboard. I change it to Q and W, as you see over here, and it's about a third of the way from the bottom, a quarter of the way. Q becomes my decrease, W is my increase because W is on the right and Q is on the left. It just makes logical sense to me. So when you look at the keyboard, Q and W on the top left, A and S on the bottom, and by default Z is for zoom, X is for flipping the colors, D is default. You can also change a few other things. The rotate function is also R by default, E is for eraser, and those are default as well. And as we go forward, there's other tools that you can change depending on how often you use them. But for now, that seems to be pretty much all the tools that are most applicable to us. You can also change the V key, which is the move tool, to something else if you prefer using that quite a bit, or you can keep it to where it is. I personally keep it to where it is as well. Aside from that, you have over here which are application menus. That's over here if you have like File, Save, File, New. It goes through all the shortcuts that are already there for you, or you can change them to any shortcut you want. I haven't changed any myself personally, but in case you do, this is where you would go find them. Once you're done, you can hit OK and escape, or you can set them back to Photoshop defaults if you want to reset everything. And these are also some saving options in case you want to save all changes. For example, this button here allows you to save all changes to the current set of shortcuts. And this one sets something new for the current set of shortcuts. So as you can see, you don't have to keep resetting every time. Also, the good side about Photoshop is once you set these keys and enter them, every time you hit open Photoshop again, it's going to have them as defaults. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. And you don't have to restart Photoshop, it's already set for you. That was an overview of keyboard shortcuts as it comes to Photoshop and tools. Now let's go on to Camera Raw basics.